of our technology track. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I think we have all learned just so much. We have one more stellar lineup of panelists talking about digital workflow. And so Abby will be bringing those folks up. I'll do just a brief introduction. We have Beatrice Robichaud from Panthera. We have Kelsey Fafara from LightForce Ortho. Callie Higgins from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. And our moderator is going to be Dominique Müller from Autodesk. And we really appreciate you ladies joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Hi.
Thank you.
All right, I'll leave you to it.
Thank you.
Good. Let's get started. I think we're really excited to be here today. So I would say we kick it off with a little bit of an introduction of the companies and what everybody is doing, and then we just jump right into our discussion. So my name is Dominique. I'm based in Denmark, working for Autodesk, and I'm leading a research and development team that is focusing on new processes, onboarding new processes, closing gaps in the additive field in terms of software, and connecting with partners, machine partners, material partners, as well as customers. Good. Who wants to go next? Beatrice.
So, hi, my name is Beatrice Robichaud. I'm from Quebec in Canada. I'm the co-founder of a company called Panthera Dental. We manufacture custom-made product for the dental industry, the sleep industry, and maxillofacial industry. So we treat regular dental cases. We also do maxillofacial in reconstruction, and we also create device to treat sleep apnea. And we use many technology, obviously 3D printing being one of the main technology we use, but also milling, 3D software, and so on and so on. And I'm in charge of a lot of stuff, mostly marketing, customer experience, product development, and to name a few. Pleasure to be there.
Great. Kelsey, would you like to go next?
Sure, absolutely. All right, so I'm Kelsey Fafara, and I lead the hardware department at LightForce Orthodontics. And our kind of mission and statement has been about bringing additive manufacturing and customized medicine to orthodontia. So not thinking necessarily from the Invisalign model, but more so those brackets that we all had when we were kids on your teeth. So I basically helped develop and the company from its very beginning, and using 3D printing as a core technology. So now my job kind of entails basically making that keep flowing and keep producing, as well as regulatory in and around 3D printing, manufacturing, actually selling these devices all across country. So,
awesome. I guess that leaves me. I'll wrap that up, introductions. My name is Callie Higgins, and I am, as Dominique mentioned, from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So for those of you who might not know what NIST is, we actually are a section of the Department of Commerce in the United States, and our sole purpose and the reason we exist is to help further and drive innovation throughout the Department of Commerce, throughout commerce, through all of industry, through standards and technology development. So that's kind of where the angle we're coming at it from. So we're this interesting, like, kind of third party, not industry, not academia, but this intermediary that helps drive a lot of this new technology. And that's kind of where I come in. I did a lot of 3D printing work in my graduate school, where I was working actually more specifically on tissue engineering constructs. So for regenerative medicine, like cartilage regeneration. And so my focus was on vat photopolymerization, so using light to transition material from liquid to solid. And I just fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the research and was able to find a really awesome partnership at NIST after my graduate school. And so I've been at NIST ever since I graduated. And so I've been really helping drive with our project leader, Jason Kilgore, a lot of the new innovation in this specific area of additive manufacturing. And we try to develop new tools to characterize these 3D printing materials. So we all can see a lot of value in 3D printing, but until we really can understand characterize and reverse engineer a lot of these materials, then we won't really have the traction and transition into mainstream manufacturing. And so that's kind of where we come in, and we're hoping to develop this new suite of to help further industry.
So what would you say, with all the experience you've gained over the last years, what was the biggest change you have seen in the dental area specifically, but also like on the material side?
Who is that directed towards?
Just jump right in, Callie.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry, I didn't know who you were directed toward. I'd say in the last, 5 to 10 years, I've been in the field probably for roughly maybe 8 years. I guess maybe it's more like 9 years. And I think one of the most, at least for this specific type of printing that I've been focusing on, which is this photopolymer printing, what's fascinating has been seeing when Chuck Hull's patent came up, at the end in the early 2000s, watching all of these new companies come into the market. And that has been wonderful to see, but also there's a lot of people that, are kind of coveting their own trade secrets, and it's difficult to get a lot of fundamental research out there to really drive the industry forward. And so I think, especially in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of academic and research investment into the technology that has really, really allowed for, exponential growth.
Yeah, nice. Beatrice, what do you think was the biggest change over the last decade, and what was the most exciting that changed?
Well, obviously, the dental industry has been a pioneer in the 3D field, 3D printing field. I mean, dental has been 3D printing for decades now. It's even more than 20 years as far as I can go. And the big change has been the new material in the dental industry, because a lot of the material that we 3D print were not able to be cast like the regular dental industry. For the public, I mean, dental, I've been for the last 2,000 years being pretty much the same, casting gold and alloy and non-precious alloy. So 3D printing, we're able to bring out a lot of new material from titanium, from also different type of alloy, and also polymer, nylon, and stuff that we're unable to either cast or even manually transform. So that's totally changed the way the dental industry is done. And what happened today that I really love to see is that because of the nature of dental medicine being mostly public, private all around the world, there's a lot of money investment in the dental industry. So it goes really fast. And today we start to see, for example, the orthopedic industry that is far behind the dental industry in the capacity and technology. Now they try to reach back and learn from the dental industry. So we're kind of always ahead of the use of 3D printer. It is known that in the dental industry, if you give a 3D printer to a dental company, they're going to make sure to use it to a level that even the creator of the 3D printer were not aware that their machine was able to do. And that's really fantastic to see that. It's amazing me.
So when we look at like the digital side of it, Kelsey, what do you think, how important is the software, the digital part, or like creating data actually before you even print something? What standpoint do we have there?
Yeah, I think, well, with 3D printing in general, and it being such a heavy into digital aspects, I mean, you need that STL file to actually do anything. It heavily relies on the software systems that you end up having or the systems that you create. And then I think even going off of what Callie and Beatrice said earlier of, having your users actually interact with that. And that's really where my company has come from it as well, as, is not just being a lab associated and taking it from 3D printing that's prototyping, and as it's now being commercialized more, but then also taking those software aspects that interact with that and pushing that forward. So I think you get that innovation in so many different ways out of just, having 3D printing as your manufacturing. From a medical device side with traceability and quality and regulations to try and make sure that you're creating not just a custom device or something that will be useful, but something that will also won't cause harm or any of those things either, and get to the right patient if you're truly customizing them. That's where your software systems are the most key thing that you can have. It creates your traceability, and that's, you know, where you see the conversations and the panelists or the speakers that happened earlier too, of they really tie it all together. And that's where, whether it's being used in your customer using it to decide on what your part ends up looking like, or as your software system that's tracing it through, there's the innovation that needs to happen through every single step, and then also making sure that it's user-friendly enough to actually use it and want to keep using it, and works for you.
Okay. And when we look at like maybe disadvantages of the digital workflow, where do you still see challenges or maybe gaps we still have to close?
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that I would say is really around that, which I think it was Roxanne who actually just said it in the last panel, of making sure that those seeds of change are planted, or that it is user-friendly enough to actually be able to use by technicians who are making it, or making it scalable in those ways, and not just have people who have patents in it or years and years of experience to actually make that system. So it's really just making sure that it is friendly.
If I can add, I mean, I agree with you, Kelsey. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges is that 3D printer are able to do an amazing design, shape, and structure, but the problem is really related to the software. I heard so often customers says, well, you know what, I'm just going to do it by hand because I know I can make it, because the software is too complicated to create the design, the shape I'm looking for. So one of the challenge that we have, depending of your business model, is that either you have to you have to support your customer how to use a software, or sometimes you even have to offer the service to literally design for your customer and train people. And one of the biggest challenges is where to find someone that know how to design a 3D part in a software, but also know dental. There's no school that do that. Yeah. Not worldwide. There's no program about design dental part. Doesn't exist. So you have to create you even have to create your own school of training within your own company, and that's take time, obviously. So I don't know for you, Kelsey and Gil, but what I've seen is that in my company, the majority of people that design are mostly video gamer, or people that play video game on the weekend.
Mathematicians. That's where it's at too.
So that's the challenge, I think, of the technology of using 3D printer. This is a challenge. The machine itself, it's amazing, but it's getting the information to the machine that is complicated.
Mm-hmm. Right, and to that point, you know, kind of to add to that a little bit, there is this whole other side where there's a reason why they don't believe that the print is going to come out, because they've had so many failed prints, or they didn't know what parameters to input, and so the print failed. And so they just get frustrated, and they lose all confidence in the system. And where we're kind of coming at it from the angle where, hey, what if we had the, you know, in situ information that is being generated while the print is occurring, and corrective action that can be applied while the print is occurring, then all of a sudden it removes this huge complication that is a barrier for a lot of these new people that are coming onto the market. And so if we can have those amazing like design mathematicians and software engineers come in, build the program to be able to, you know, iteratively compensate during the print, then it would eliminate that need to educate each of these different technicians. At least that's from our perspective.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. I went to my dentist, I think it was 2 years ago, to just get the normal checkup, and I walked in and I saw that there was a 3D printer based in the dentist's office, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I didn't realize that we are that far, that really the dentists are open to have a 3D printer on site to customize things for you, which was really surprising. And I ended up spending 2 extra hours at my dentist. I mean, whoever does that. But I was so amazed when he explained me that he really wanted to jump into this really early to understand what's going on, what will change, training his staff to make sure that they all understand the technology. And he also told me that there are a lot of challenges for them. It's the software part, of course. Which kind of tools should they use? How should they supply materials? Where should the material come from? How should it be recycled? He had so many questions, and we are still sometimes on the phone discussing what is the best way and how to do it. And I see a lot of advantages in having this technology on site. Like, you walk in, you get your prosthesis or your whatever you need customized on site. But do you see any other advantages beside the customization? It can be sustainability, costs. Like, where do you think is the biggest focus, or what should be the biggest advantage of having these technologies and having access to them? Whoever wants to jump in, please go.
There is I mean, obviously the benefit is that we're talking about customized medicine, and I think every medicine industry is understanding that reality today, that you don't, because we're used to know what we used to do in medicine is take something and make the patient adapt to what we have in our hand. Now we adapt the product to the patient. It's really switching the way we work, and this is really beneficial. We see that patient have better healing over time with whatever the treatment that we're talking. And it's not only true for dental, it's true for orthopedic, it's true for a lot of surgery you can name. But the other major problem, and I think Callie, you will be able to add, and Kelsey, you might have also, the problem of your dentist getting his own 3D printer in-house are also a major problem right now, because we're still doing healthcare. So it's need to be controlled. It's need to be sure that what's going to be done will be secure for the patient. And unfortunately, dentists are not 3D printer professional. They don't know the reality of using 3D printing material, how they're going to treat the 3D printer. I visit a lot of office, as you can understand, and sometimes you see the 3D printer being in the cafeteria where the employees are eating their lunch. I don't want to have that product in my mouth as a patient, and that's create a problem, because I understand regulatory association like FDA, Health Canada, CE Mark, like stopping us for that reason. But when you're a company that want to be structured, you understand that those regulatory are useful, but also very complicated to go through, because you understand. And so there's a lot of advantage, but also it has to still be controlled to a certain level to avoid having a prosthesis printed while someone eat their lunch. Makes sense.
Right. I think that's a really good point. I mean, but I think one wonderful aspect of dentists is that they are very familiar with the chemistry behind the process, because they use it in fillings every day. And so it's kind of funny, like my husband's actually a pediatric dentist, ironically. And so we were both learning photopolymerization at the exact same time, which is just so funny, and when he was in dental school. But they do understand the fundamentals, but like to your point, it's like you need to like educate them. They're like, oh, I do this chemistry in this kid's mouth, like why can't I have it in the kitchen or in the cafeteria? It's like, no, like this is like, think about the lab that you implement, that you put, you build all of these models in, like you wouldn't put that in the cafeteria. Yeah. But I agree, definitely.
I think to those points, that then also from the innovation standpoint, or the positive standpoints that we can also look at is actually that the seeds of innovation. And that's what 3D printing allows you to have, is just this fast-paced innovation. And that's not something that comes to the medical device field very often, right. At all. So, I mean, that's where you get back to the regulation aspect of not being able to necessarily keep up, or we're moving too quickly. And that's where we think people like Callie, who's doing the research to help us to get all these guidances or help us answer these questions. But that is at least what 3D printing is. The huge positive of it within the field is we can actually innovate at the speed that we want to innovate. Not necessarily you have a new product line out every 3 years, but you can either make something ad hoc for a patient, or hey, what if a software, or what if a hardware company, what if a 3D printing company, what if we made physical medical devices and we made changes to those at the same pace as a software company? They put out 10 different changes every day, 3 different changes every day. And instead of one new product or one new innovation happening every 3 years that maybe has 3 small things to it, you did 20 new product launches a year. You did 10 new design features to an existing product. Well, it's 3D printed, so all I have to do is send a new file out, make sure I get my good regulatory approvals and go through my good quality processes. But then I can actually meet my customers, who may be the doctors, at their playing field and say, what's wrong with my product? Help me make it better. And then actually make it better much, much, much faster than any medical device has ever been done before. So I think that's where we get this power into, what if you could have a hardware company that releases just as fast as a software company? That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, I think. And where do you see the challenges that we are still facing? There are probably many with just, I'm not an expert in the field, but I know when I want to certify a 3D printed part, it's really difficult, and I have to certify every single part because it's not really reproducible, and it's a painful process. So how do we get to a point where this will be easier? What do you see in the future? What needs to happen so that we can really get to the point that we release as fast as a software company?
Mm-hmm. I think to start on that is really around those software systems that we spoke about earlier, and creating that easier interface, and just the knowledge that we can have within this field. It's still, even if we've been using it for a long time, there's so many aspects to it that are just nascent. And we're only now just building these, this knowledge base really for ourselves. So you have kind of that portion. But then also just how do you manufacture these things? How do you get them out there? And I think that's the other area that's, how do you grow and how do you scale a mass customized device, or just customized devices in general? And once kind of getting over that hump or getting to that next stage, then, you can run off of all these other models of other companies that have scaled into very massive ways. But I think it really ties into that. How do you interact with it from a software perspective? How do you actually make it work for you instead of you work for it, type of deal?
There's many challenges. I mean, the software is a challenge. One of the problem, and then Dominique, you probably understand well with your job, is that one of the biggest problem is that when you look at production, software designing, and regulatory, one of the aspects that I see pretty much every week is that you cannot do that because regulatory don't want, or software is not able. But the thing is that the patient is still alive, and yes, he have a specific, let's say, mouth that it's against all the book that you can read in medicine, but this is how they are. The patient have, I don't know, very far tooth, and you have to create a structure that goes there, but it goes against all regulatory. It says you shall never create something that long, as an example, and software are locked to respect regulatory. The problem is that, so what's gonna happen with the patient? So it's at that point, someone will say, a doctor will say, you know what, let's handcraft and handmade it, because the technology is limited for either software or regulatory. More often than anything else, machines are surprisingly very open. 3D printer, if you go in the industrial level of 3D printer, they can really do whatever you want. I mean, it's just your imagination. But software and regulatory is the biggest challenge. It's really funny to say, no, you cannot do that. And he was like, well, the patient is like that. You know, it's like if you have someone in front of you that have, for example, a third arm, and you argue with the whole population that it doesn't exist and shall not exist. The reality is that is in front of you, and you have to treat that patient with a third arm. So I don't care about your regulatory, I don't care about your software. So one decision, and I think it's important that if you go into medical 3D printing and customize, you have to take a decision, is either you develop your own software as what we do in our company, or you make yourself good partnership with a software company, for example, could be Autodesk, but you make sure that if you need something special, they will react as fast as you do, because the patient is almost on the table receiving their surgery. They need something now. So we don't have time to develop a software for 2 years. It has to happen now. And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenge of using custom 3D printing medicine, is that we always have to adapt the technology, because there's always a patient that arrives and says, I'm different, that everything you think about, I'm the one that is out of your boundaries.
Right. And kind of dialing it back a little bit to kind of the big picture printing component, there's just so many materials out there, and there's no real one way to like standardize or quantify the quality of that new material. And so if we could, and for those who are familiar with material testing, like there's this structure, it's called the dog bone structure. And that's what's generally used to test like the mechanical properties of these different materials. And because like by virtue of the printing process, they won't behave like a bulk material, but they're assumed to behave as if they are. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is generate or create a standard printing structure that is more representative of the mechanical properties at the end of the line, so is it like a very like densely packed lattice structure that's more representative? Is it, there's just a lot of different kind of potential concepts, but we need to, have a next gen dog bone structure to really understand and allow everyone to quantify what material they're using. And so it's just a little bit more uniformity across the sector, just because right now it's kind of like a grab bag. you look at it, you look at the spec and assume that it's going to work, but really if your exposure conditions are off, if your light bulb is a little bit dimmer, if like your LEDs are losing their energy, then all of a sudden your print doesn't have the mechanical properties that you expect it to have. And that's a huge deal. So I think that's definitely one aspect that needs to be kind of focused on going forward.
I think that speaks directly to like Beatrice's thought earlier too, of like that is a part of the regulatory. That's right. That's the performance testing. That's the worst case scenario testing that you have to do. And if you can make something that is standardized for that, then you start to be able to maybe do some of these next generation things. And as you were saying, if we are, truly customizing one thing and the patient is on our table, well, then that's also our inhibitor for growth too. If we can't react to that, then we can't grow our company or our sector into actually becoming one of those things that is just general knowledge and used everywhere. So these two together really bring it into light of these are what we need to do and how we'll end up kind of really getting there. But they seem to be definitively the biggest hurdles.
So is the challenge then also working with the authorities to really make them understand what needs to change? And not just using processes that are in place, or is it really the end user in the end and educating the end user? Because I have the feeling that people are really open for these new technologies. They see really a chance in it and they want to adopt, but they're really scared of like all the almost paperwork that is coming with it, to call it really old fashioned, and really like taking the risk on that you might produce a product that's not good enough and you might not be able to really qualify it in the way it should be.
You hit it right nail on the head with the last statement there. It's a risk no matter what. And I think that generally goes for any technology or anything that you kind of do, but that's where you have, yes, us as advocators for our industry saying, hey, we need to get more information out there, more information into the regulations. to make that easier. But I think we can also be the examples of how they end up changing those things. And we give them the playbook by using their inherent processes that are originally there and then saying, this is what it can be for the next person. And going along with that and kind of being a part of changing that, or just deciding something new to give to other people to say it's not that scary. But that will take, kind of all of us together, or a lot of people maybe doing it right first, or finding out maybe not necessarily the right way to do it, but a whole bunch of ways to do the same thing, which ends up with a good outcome, and really working together to get there.
Right. And kind of to that point, like, I think one thing that is over-promising. Like, I just have these grand visions of everything printing can do, but I really think one of the huge, like, something we really need to emphasize as a field is that we aren't there yet. You know, we need to stay humble, very much so that people will trust us when we make these moves and when we say things. Because I think there's a really, like, a very real risk of, you know, all these people coming onto the market and doing all these wonderful things, because it could be a really wonderful technology. And then all of a sudden things start failing, and now there's no trust by the consumer and never going to rebound. And so that's a really big concern. And so I think just like making sure that we know what we're doing every way, and we can definitively to our customers.
Yeah, it is. Well, obviously, it is challenging because I know, Kelly, you work within the U.S. government, and I don't know, Kelsey, if you sell around in other country than U.S. But obviously, when you sell in many different countries, you have to face different regulatory. To name few, since I'm Canadian based, we have Health Canada. Obviously, we want to sell in U.S. We have FDA, and the European market being CE marked, to take three of the big one. And what is challenging is that depending of the country, there's let's say they always give us like let's say a guideline of what our product should do to succeed going through and having our approval. And the problem is that you kind of try to fine tune one product that at the end of the day, none of your product will look like the one you filed for. And then you try to explain that, they're like, no, but I mean, your product have to be the same every time. It says, no, it's going to have the same characteristic, the same kind of feel, but it's going to be different every time. Honestly, surprisingly, FDA might be very heavy, a lot of work, but at least you know where you have to go. Health Canada is probably the worst. I mean, it's like, well, not sure, do something. We'll then decide if it's good enough. You know, CE mark's not too bad, I will say, according to my regulatory team. But I think that's the challenge. Obviously, there's still a lot of learning from regulatory government, and then instance to understand that it's not a top-the-shelf product. It's not something that I can design one sample and says that's how it's going to be for forever. I mean, they really try to standardize the industry, and the whole concept of the industry is to remove the word standard. It's the whole concept to remove it, and they try to make us use it as much as possible. So I will say, honestly, it's kind of frustrating because the problem is, as you say, if a dentist can buy a little 3D printer for $2,000 in their office and start doing whatever they want, it's difficult because who's going to knock at their door and verify that what you do is safe and regulatory approved and so on. And so as a company that you want to do it professionally and respect the regulatory, it takes 6 months to a year and even sometimes 2 years to achieve to sell the product. Meanwhile, a lot of smaller companies that have like 10 customers here and there and buy a dozen of 3D printer are taking the market and ruining also the quality of the market. And then that's, as Callie says, what could be afraid is that at some point patient, right now 3D printing medicine is cool, but if it goes wrong, it will get bad, and then patient will not trust it anymore. Yeah. So that's the kind of a challenge right now, where we have, yes, to be patient to achieve it, but also we have to be fast before the little small player that don't understand, don't care. Because I mean, I've seen people doing dental prosthesis using like a FDM home 3D printer buy on Amazon.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's terrifying. Wow.
There's a whole story on the internet about a guy that made his own Invisalign using an FDM printer.
Okay.
Probably didn't turn out too well.
Well, no, as a matter of fact, it did end good because the guy was, intensive engineering background behind, but now he make that it's accessible for the common human being that just buy it on Amazon, and then you're gonna provide one for you, one for your daughter, one for your uncle, one for your cousin, and now the trouble will be there for real.
I think something to kind of bring it back to is, and this is, I was actually doing this morning, is this phrase that's now I've really been thinking about, and specifically within, the additive manufacturing and medical fields and regulatory, is this phrase, mass-produced customized device. And that being, when people think of subtractive manufacturing, and you can understand how that kind of comes together, or it's produced and then I customize it. But what happens when you customize it digitally before it's ever even made? And kind of that's really the world that we're trying to potentially start being in. And maybe it's not, you have one-offs that are for particular patients, but it's mass-produced customization. And that's kind of, I think, is scary to the medical field, but is also exciting. And that's, we're coming back to Callie's statement of being humble and saying, like, we're there, but don't go crazy yet.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe we have a question, I think, in the chat. So somebody's asking if there are specific new standards for dental AM materials, can we see a change there, or is it still something we hope will happen one day?
From at least from the perspective of standards, I'll speak on behalf of NIST. We're not working currently on developing standards for the dental field. Maybe there are some other aspects. I know that ASTM, there's a lot of other industries that are definitely working on standards, and same with, FDA has approved a lot of these 3D printing materials. But at least from our standpoint, like for photopolymer AM, we're not working on developing any standards. We help inform them, but we don't develop the standards themselves.
I definitely can't talk to AM materials, so I'm not.
Yeah, me neither. I haven't had any more comment on that question, unfortunately.
Are we even at a point where we can really reproduce all materials we need in the dental sector, or are we still missing some standard materials that can be produced in any other way than 3D printing?
There's still some material that are not 3D printable. Let's say that you still have to use real milling technology. For example, there's still a massive use of gold allow right now in the dental industry. So 3D printing gold is not something really common. And then there's a couple of polymer material also that are being available in the market. And I know there's a lot of development of 3D printing polymer, and I'm really looking forward to see. But again, one of the major problem is that dental industry is also surprisingly one of the most precise industry in the whole medicine field, where when you do a surgery, pretty much anywhere on the body, you can be about 100 to 500 micron off, and it's still going to be fit perfectly well. Versus in the dental industry, we're really talking about 5 to 25 micron of precision.
Yeah.
And that's really a big challenge because, for example, I was joking with FDM printer. I mean, I do have own in my house where I do toys for my kids, pretty cool, but they're far too precise, okay? I mean, they're a millimeter off of what they should be. So the problem is that we need not only material, but we also need accuracy and in 3D printer. And that's something that kind of frustrates me a little, that now a lot of companies develop 3D printer everywhere from, as I say, you can have 3D printer for $500 to $250,000 3D printer now. The problem is there is a difference between those printer, and then a lot of 3D printer company advertise that no, our printer are good, they can do everything. And yeah, so that's a little a challenge that I see there with. So yes, there's some material that still need to be developed. I'm looking forward to that because, and obviously one of the biggest challenges is biocompatibility. There's a lot of material that can be 3D printed right now, but a lot of them are none or few are really biocompatible for dental use. And that's, we'll see in the future.
Yeah. I think that's something that comes out of this too, and just thinking about just the process of 3D printing, and definitively within the medical device space, it is not just the accuracy and the materials, and definitively on biocompatibility. That's like definitely one of the hardest things you have to figure out, because then it goes into the regulations again. But on getting those digital workflows, and that's really what I think we'll want to end up see happening, and knowing that that's also in its nascent stages for 3D printing, and that post-processing. You think about just printing, but and especially with, if you have something that is biocompatible, there's these post-processing aspects of it that it's you think you can 3D print in an hour and a half and then you have your part. No, it actually takes days or a week to actually get this really to its final stage and point. And that's where those, this industry 4.0 comes across in the digital workflows of how do you build that digital factory to actually get you there, but keeping those expectations of it doesn't just happen, and it doesn't just get precise, and it doesn't just get accurate. It's not just biocompatible as soon as you have it, and kind of changing that narrative of what 3D printing is, from thinking of it as it's a prototype that helps me, make cool things and try to figure out my final product. But what happens when it is the final product? And that really transforming how we work and what we work, and what we need, honestly, to actually get to those next points, and that being a part of the whole package.
Yeah, I think that rounds it up pretty nicely, that we are still at the beginning and there's a lot to come, and it will be an exciting way, I think. We have seen good starts, I guess, but there's still a long way ahead. And let's say, maybe as a last question, if it would be a perfect world and you have one wish, what would you wish would be better already to make it easier on a daily basis in your business?
That's a tough question.
That wasn't on our list.
No, that's
I will say, honestly, I will say the biggest factor is regulatory. If I could have, like faster regulatory approval, well, if we can just get rid of them, okay. Talking about 3D printing, obviously the easy question is I want more money to do more development, but I think realistically speaking, regulatory have to get to where we are today, because we can develop. It's the whole point is that a lot of company will use 3D printing to do a prototype, then manufacture the actual product. Mm-hmm. So imagine when the prototype is already your final product. So you can develop new product like within days, like that. Like we have 5 new products ready to go. Oh yeah, it's going to take 2 years to get one of them approved everywhere. So this is a big step. So you're always like, okay, which product we're going to launch? Because it's kind of frustrating. You have to choose and make decision on that. And so that will be my wish, regulatory to be more adapted.
I think for me, I actually don't. I think the regulatory needs to get to where we are and needs to kind of play catch up. But I think it's in the it ends up being how we actually make our products too, and how we end up getting to those points. As you're saying, if you're making the prototype is the product, how do we end up kind of functioning and making that prototype actually work for regulations now, but then making the regulations work for us would be way better. And I think from my side would be those inherent, like those digital workflows that either you have to go find somebody who does a 3D printed, workflow software very well, that's very tailored to what you in your company does, or you have to build it in-house. And so it's about maintaining that traceability and that quality that you actually need to hit for those regulatory metrics. That I think is one of the hardest things. So it's making those systems work for additive, but then also be flexible enough to tailor to your company, and you know, knowing that we can make a ton of things with additive manufacturing, but how do we get those softwares to focus in on what that company just wants, or the singular device, or the singular workflow, or traceability that needs to happen to then grow. And grow each and every time, and kind of standardizing that process for us.
Right, and I can just add just real quickly, I think, you know, kind of to highlight both of what you guys just said, that there's just a lot need for the regulatory side. And it's interesting because, you know, 3D printing is changing so quickly. There's so many new technologies coming out all the time. So I think it's a very unique opportunity for the regulatory agencies to maybe pair up right now as the technology is growing to help inform that growth. It's like, what are the metrics that we need you to be meeting in order for it to be approved? And it's like, well, what if we just design the printer to automatically meet those specs, or design the material to automatically meet those specs? And that would be, I think, a really, really wonderful way to go forward and make this a lot more tractable of a technology, especially from what you're saying is the regulatory side.
That sounds good. I think we are at the end of our time, actually.
Yes, great job finishing right on time. Thank you ladies so much. I think this is, you know, as Beatrice said, dental has been a pioneer, and all these other fields are really contributing as well. So glad to have you all. I hope everyone will join us here in about 15 minutes on the main stage for our keynote panel, our last session of the conference. Again, thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing about what you all are working on in the future. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Emily, and both Dominique. It was a really wonderful opportunity. We really appreciate you.